If you've been around the channel for a while, you know I've spent a lot of time roasting awful comic book outfits. I decided to go through all the channel's bad costume videos and stitch them together into one massive mega cut. Whether you're rewatching all these classic disasters back to back or catching them for the first time without having to hunt through the back catalog, welcome to over 40 minutes of the worst costumes in comic book history. The Zebra Suit Batman. This was first seen in 1960s Detective Comics number 275. While on patrol, the dynamic duo break up a robbery at the Gotham Art Museum. The robbery is being headed up by a zebra suit wearing gang member named, of course, Zebra Man. He has these powers that let him move large objects. He escapes to his hideout and tells his henchmen that the lines on his suit are what gives him his powers, and that he controls it using his special belt. Batman and Robin show up at the hideout, and during a fight, a machine is turned on that blasts Batman's with the same energy and gives his batsuit the same zebra stripe pattern and same powers. Since Batman does not have a belt to control the powers, everything around him is sent flying. Batman is only able to stop the Zebra Man by using an electromagnet that he finds in a junkyard. The suit is ridiculous, not only because of the zebra pattern, but the fact that they imply that the lines on the suit are the cause of the powers, and that makes absolutely no sense at all. And while being somewhat comical, it still comes off as pretty dumb. The next costume on my list comes from someone who, let's be honest, has had some real questionable fashion choices over the years. Even his most famous costume could be considered overtly loud, especially with all the purple. However, Hawkeye's worst costume has got to be the one that he wore right after the Kree Skull War, way back in 1978, in Avengers issue number 98. He's wearing a purple headband instead of a mask, a stylish purple tunic with a deep V-cut neck that looks more like a dress, and cuffed boots, but with absolutely no pants. It is just so goofy looking, I don't know how anyone could take him seriously dressed like this. Luckily, the costume didn't last long and was changed a year later in Avengers issue 109. Number 3 on our list comes from the year 1994, when DC Comics decided to change up their line of Green Lantern titles, and one of those titles that was affected by these changes was Guy Gardner Warrior. Guy was stripped of his current powers and then given new powers. These new powers were supposedly inspired by the TV show Power Rangers, which was super popular at the time, and DC wanted to capitalize on that popularity. They did this by having Guy go on a trip to the Amazon, where he drinks from the chalice of the warrior water. This activates alien DNA that was implanted in him over a millennium ago. Yes, it's as stupid as it sounds here. He embraced his new alien heritage by tattooing his upper body and face with bright, primary colored, ridiculously looking tattoos. He also gets bonus points for rocking a pseudo yin-yang clad cloth belt. It's definitely a dumb look, and a good example of how not to reinvent a character. Our fourth fashion crime was committed by a plumber named Griffin Gogol. He got superpowers in a super strange way. After fixing pipes for an old psychiatrist who couldn't pay him, the doctor instead offered to use his hypnosis to help him quit smoking. However, in a twist, this unlocked amazing powers that could have made him one of Marvel's strongest heroes. But there was a catch. He also became terrified of the smallest fires. Captain Ultra's costume is a real eyesore. It's like someone exploded a paint palette on him. He's got a green and yellow mask, a blue neck piece and cape, a red, yellow, and orange tunic, and a giant golden belt. To top it off, he wears green and black boots with yellow cuffs. It is a truly bizarre look and pretty stupid. The costume I save for last is probably the dumbest of them all. The one-issue wonder from Doom Patrol isn't exactly family-friendly either. This villain, who debuted in 1993, sports a massive, weaponized codpiece. And of course, he goes by the name of Codpiece. Seriously, how practical is that? Using your groin as a multi-tool seems like a risky strategy. Not to mention, it looks absolutely absurd. Let's not forget the logistics of taking that thing off. Bathroom breaks must be quite the ordeal. I mean, what's dumber than a big old cannon strapped to your crotch while you're out robbing banks? It's ridiculous. The person who created this character and this costume had to know what they were doing. It's gotta be intentionally stupid. It's just that dumb. Beyonder is a godlike entity from beyond the Marvel Universe. He first burst onto the scene in the iconic Secret Wars event. This powerful being pitted Earth's heroes and villains against each other on a battleground planet. While the Beyonder is undoubtedly one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, his fashion sense, especially in Avengers issue number 261, leaves much to be desired. The giant football shoulder pad-like armor piece jutting from his chest is a truly bizarre design choice. It's hard to imagine why an all-powerful being would need such a ridiculous accessory. Thankfully, this unfortunate look didn't last long, and the Beyonder soon reverted to a more conventional appearance. Up next, we have Sandman, who is one of Spider-Man's most iconic and dangerous foes. He's even surprised fans by joining the Avengers at times. While his usual striped sweater isn't the most intimidating look, his frightful 4 armor is truly dumb. As a being made of sand, he's already incredibly durable, so why the need for the bulky armor? And what's with the helmet that looks like an upside-down playground swing? It's even dumber when you consider that thanks to the Wizard's upgrade to this armor, Sandman ends up manipulating his silicate form into an oil slick, which he immediately slips on and traps himself in the beam of a nearby freeze wave. I don't know if you can get much dumber than that. Killraven, a warrior born on an alternate Earth a year before a Martian invasion, had a far from ordinary childhood. Due to unfortunate events, he was subjected to strange experiments under the watchful eye of Keeper Whitman. Unbeknownst to the Martians, Whitman was a secret resistance fighter, and his experience unlocked Killraven's incredible abilities, mind control over Martians, and superhuman strength. While Killraven is a formidable fighter, his early costume is, to put it mildly, questionable. A leather harness jumpsuit combo, paired with a headband and thigh-high boots, make him look more like a futuristic dominatrix than a fearsome warrior. And let's not forget the flashy throwing stars, the perfect accessory for his questionable ensemble. It's hard to believe that a character as powerful as Killraven would choose such a ridiculous and dumb outfit. Our next fashion crime comes courtesy of the villain called Pastepot Pete, who first appeared in Strange Tales number 104, decked out in a painter's outfit, armed with a paint can and a hose filled with adhesive ammunition. He seemed more like a clumsy handyman than a menacing criminal. His lack of practical design sense was quickly exposed when the Human Torch easily defeated him by heating up his adhesive can. What might be even dumber than his costume might be the fact that Pete still proved to be quite the formidable foe. In a single day, he managed to rob a bank, trap police officers, steal a truck, and even hijack a missile, all while sporting a questionable fashion sense. It's a testament to his determination, if nothing else. In the iconic Marvel vs. DC crossover, a bizarre and unforgettable moment occurred, and the consequences were less than flattering for Diana. The moment when Wonder Woman briefly wielded Mjolnir, she was forced into a ridiculous-looking costume that looked more like something from a low-budget fantasy film. A leather outfit complete with a cape and a helmet was a far cry from her usual elegant and empowering attire. It was a stark reminder that even the most powerful heroes can have a fashion misstep, and was probably inspired by a costume Thor wore in Thor issue number 502. Thor's costume was a blue, form-fitting suit that strangely didn't quite cover his chest, revealing a bit more skin than usual. Atop his head was a blue helmet that, despite covering his face, still managed to expose his eyes and hair. The iconic red cape remained, but it was paired with silver boots and bands, giving the costume a more futuristic, almost space. It was as if the costumes were designed to modernize the characters, but ended up creating costumes that were both dumb, visually unappealing, and a little reminiscent of things worn by exotic dancers. In Captain America issue number 180, Steve Rogers gives up on being Captain America after losing faith in the government and decides it's time for a new look. He supposedly spends hours and goes through 3 whole pads of paper designing a darker, moodier costume. Once the costume is ready, he struggles to come up with a name. He considers Daredevil, which is already taken, Captain Blood, Gypsy, and even Vagrant, before landing on Nomad, which he likes because it means a man without a country. When Nomad finally hits the scene, the costume isn't great. It's got gold boots, a gold belt, a cape, and a deep open chest, making it wildly impractical and honestly kind of ridiculous. Compared to his classic Captain America suit, which was sleek and functional, the Nomad outfit feels like a big miss. no surprise, the look didn't stick. By Captain America number 184, Steve was back in his iconic red, white, and blue, realizing he could stand for his ideals without blindly supporting the United States government. Still, the name No Man lived on, getting picked up later by characters like Jack Monroe and Ricky Barnes. The Russo brothers even teased Cap's Nomad identity before Avengers Infinity War, but luckily they didn't bring back the original costume. While the Nomad era was short-lived, one of those weird, memorable moments in Captain America's history that fans can't help but look back on and laugh. Now for a costume that was created to be dumb on purpose. Irving Forbush made his debut as Forbushman on the cover of Not Brand X #1, Marvel's hilarious parody series. His first full story and origin, backed by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Tom Sutton, appeared in issue 5 of the same name. Irving Forbush is your average, well-meaning goofball with big dreams of becoming a superhero, living with his overbearing and harsh aunt. Irving's journey begins in the most unlikely way. One day, while he is washing dishes, his aunt furiously tosses a cooking pot onto his head. Rather than letting the humiliation get to him, Irving is struck by inspiration and creates one of the dumbest costumes ever. He modifies the pot by drilling eye holes, creating his makeshift superhero mask. Paired with his trusty red long johns and black galoshes, Forbushman is born. While Forbushman never achieved household name status, he remained a recurring presence in Marvel's humor titles. He appeared regularly in Not Brand X during its original run, and made a comeback in the 1990s comedy series What The?, where his absurd escapades delighted fans of Marvel's satirical side. Forbushman's biggest moment in modern comics came in 2010's Captain America Who Won't Wield the Shield, a parody one-shot that took playful jabs at Marvel's iconic characters and storylines. It's unlikely that the goofy Forbushman will ever take center stage in the Marvel Universe. With his fourth wall breaking antics and self-aware humor, he paved the path for characters like Deadpool, and pioneered the kind of meta-commentary and irreverent humor that later became a defining feature of Marvel's storytelling, proving that even the most unlikely hero with an incredibly dumb costume can find a place in Marvel's ever-expanding universe, especially when humor is involved. The next costume, worn by Cosmic Boy, has been referred to as both the stripper costume and the disco costume. While both names are fitting, more commonly known as his Bronze Age costume. When I first saw this outfit, I was absolutely speechless. It replaces all the pink elements from his previous costumes with bare skin. It's as if Cosmic Boy decided to wear a strapless black swimsuit, cut a massive section out of the middle, and accessorized it with black gloves and boots. Honestly, how does this thing even stay on his body? This peculiar redesign debuted in Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes issue number 214 in 1976, and stands out as one of the most bizarre costume choices ever. Some have speculated that it was a coloring mistake, but no, it was entirely intentional. While I'll agree that Mike Grell's artwork brought many positive changes to the book, including some new great character designs, this particular look just doesn't work for me. I'm sure there are fans who appreciate it, but all I can see is a skin-colored tee with abs. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, is known for her classic, iconic Fantastic Four costume. Not every look of hers has been a winner. One of her absolute worsts was the infamous redesign in Fantastic Four issue number 371, featuring a completely unnecessary and ridiculous boob window, shaped like a giant four. This bizarre costume choice came out of nowhere, tied to an abrupt personality shift that made Susan colder and more detached, with no real explanation. And seriously, what was the purpose of that cleavage window? It added nothing to her character and felt entirely out of step with who Susan Storm is. As the heart of the Fantastic Four, Susan's character has always been defined by her strength, empathy, and intelligence. This costume, however, seemed to prioritize the shock value and objectification over any meaningful development. Unsurprisingly, it's widely regarded as one of her most hated looks, more of a step backward than anything that enhanced her role as a superhero, and definitely a dumb costume. In January of 1967, Black Hawk issue 228 kicked off one of the weirdest eras for the team. It all started when Batman told the President of the United States that the Black Hawks were washed-up has-beens. To fix their image, the team got new identities and costumes. And let's just say they weren't that great. But the worst of the bunch? Chuck, the team's communication specialist, now called the Listener. His costume was basically a purple pajama set covered in ears. Seriously, it's a stretch to even call it a costume. It's hard to imagine how the rest of the team didn't burst out laughing every time they saw him. Not to mention the fact that it has zero utility at all, and it just looks really stupid. Fans weren't into it either. The new look for the team was so unpopular, the series started losing about 71,000 readers per issue. After just 14 issues, the team ditched their new outfits and went back to their classic uniforms. The listener's pajama phase is one of those what were they thinking moments in comic history. First up is Silver Sorceress, who made her debut in Justice League of America number 87. She's a hero from the nuclear-ravaged world of Angor. Initially, she fought against the Justice League, but later teamed up with them. After being captured by the extremists, the villains who destroyed her world, she helped Justice League Europe defeat them and joined that team. Sadly, she sacrificed herself to stop Dreamslave, leaving her friend Blue Jay as the last survivor of their people. While Silver Sorceress is heavily inspired by Scarlet Witch, her costume just doesn't measure up. Scarlet Witch's outfit is iconic and reflects her magical, mysterious vibes, but Sorceress's look feels like a cheap knockoff. The gold bodysuit with a cutout to show off her abs, a red cape, brown gloves and boots, and a terrible brown helmet that looks like it has bunny ears or something on top. Her outfit doesn't even give off any mystical or magical vibes, which is pretty ironic for a sorceress. It's more like generic space armor than arcane wizardry. And the fact that her name has silver in it, but her costume has no silver, makes no sense. I get that the character is canonically colorblind, but couldn't someone clue her in that she's wearing the completely wrong colors? Next, we have Mr. Sarcastic, also known as Tim Drake, third person to take on the role of Robin in DC Comics. He's no stranger to different costumes, but one of the most ridiculous looks comes from Young Justice issue number 52, where he temporarily took on the alias of Mr. Sarcastic. This happened when the team became reality TV stars, and Tim wanted to keep his secret identity safe. By creating the over-the-top persona, Mr. Sarcastic, he managed to stay anonymous while still doing his superhero thing. But seriously, this costume just gets dumber the longer you look at it. Pants seem normal enough until you spot that giant cowboy belt buckle, paired with a sleeveless shirt that has netting on the sides, a fur collar, and a cape covered in flames that would make the mayor of Flavortown jealous. And let's not forget the studded leather wrist cuffs and green lens sunglasses. How is this even a disguise? If you walked into a room wearing this, nobody would miss you. Also, totally unrelated, but how does his hair work? It literally grows longer moments later. It's just so dumb. Then there's Adam X, also known as X-Treme, who perfectly embodies Marvel's 90s aesthetic, era known for its exaggerated designs and over-the-top machismo. His look is a checklist of 90s tropes. Long, flowing hair, a soul patch, nonsensical spikes all over his costume, excessive arm and leg bands, sometimes a backwards baseball cap. These elements combine to create a character who feels more like a parody of the decade than a serious hero. The result? A costume that's both impractical and visually chaotic, showcasing the era's obsession with bombastic and edgy designs. Adam X made a comeback in X-Men Legends, where he was confirmed as Cyclops and Havoc's long-lost half-brother. Fittingly, they kept his ridiculous costume, leaning into nostalgia and reminding fans just how extreme the 90s were. Adam X is a symbol of a time when comic book designs tossed logic aside, spikes, pouches, and attitude. Now let's talk about the Walrus. His costume is a masterclass in bad design, combining clashing elements into an outfit that feels both nonsensical and laughably unthreatening. At its core, it's based on a walrus theme featuring a brown bodysuit, tusks, and whiskers. While animal-themed costumes can work, this one leans too heavily into the literal, making it feel more like a low-budget Halloween costume than something a supervillain would wear. The design really goes off the rails with the bizarre addition of a rainbow-colored insignia on his chest. Rainbows are cool, but this addition has nothing to do with a walrus. It feels completely random, as if someone slapped it on the last minute to add color, ignoring how horribly it clashes with the rest of the outfit. The bright rainbow emblem stands out so much against the otherwise drab, walrus-like brown that it makes the costume even more ridiculous. Plus, the outfit lacks any intimidating qualities. Most villains aim for costumes that inspire fear or at least command attention, but the walrus looks like he's ready for a children's stage play about sea life. His whiskers and tusks are more comical than threatening, making it hard to take him seriously. With that random rainbow insignia, it's tough to tell if the costume was meant to confuse, amuse, or both. Ultimately, the walrus's costume is a perfect example of poor design choices piling up to create something utterly absurd. It's goofy, unbalanced, and totally unfit for a supervillain, making it one of the dumbest costumes in Marvel's history. Finally, we have Herbie Popnecker, aka the Fat Fury. He's the gold standard of intentionally ridiculous character design. Debuting in Forbidden Worlds number 73, way back in 1958, Herbie is an oddball hero, a short, chubby, emotionless boy whose unassuming look hides nearly limitless power. His abilities are wild, like chatting with animals, walking through the sky, and wielding magical lollipops. But his costume-altered ego takes his absurdity to new heights. The Fat Fury is what happens when you fully embrace ridiculousness. After failing superhero school, Herbie designs his own costume. A bright red, full-body set of long underwear with a dropped C, blue cape, a cheap plastic mask, and for reasons that defy all logic, a toilet plunger on his head. If you want a costume that screams deliberately dumb, this one checks every box. It's impractical, goofy, and impossible to take seriously, just like Herbie himself. What makes Herbie's costume work, though, is that it's clearly meant to be silly. Unlike other dumb costumes that are unintentionally bad, the Fat Fury's look fully leans into the absurd. It is a parody of superhero tropes, poking fun at flashy costumes and exaggerated machismo with its sheer lack of effort or logic. Plunger alone makes you question if Herbie even tried, and that's the joke. It's so dumb. It circles back around to being endearing. Herbie's Fat Fury costume might be one of the dumbest outfits in comic book history, but it's intentionally silly, making it a perfect fit for one of the most unconventional heroes of all time. When you think about the high-stakes world of supervillainy, you usually picture a certain level of intimidation, precision, menace, maybe even a little style. Brian Hibbs had none of that. Before he ever put on a costume, Hibbs was an interior decorator, which means at some point he understood balance, proportion, and how things are supposed to function in a space. The second he decided to become a criminal, that entire skill set disappeared. And not just in execution, but in concept. Because Hibbs didn't just want to be a supervillain, he wanted to be a very specific one. He became obsessed with Frank Oliver, the original Kangaroo, a man who was already widely considered a joke. He decided that the real problem wasn't the idea, but the follow-through. After Oliver's death, Hibbs spent years training himself to replicate his idol's abilities, building toward a career based entirely on doubling down on a failed blueprint. Eventually, he got his shot. Hibbs took on the identity of the second Kangaroo, where his big debut ended the way most of his career would. Face to face with Spider-Man, his first encounter with the wall crawler was an easy loss. Then he escaped custody, came back for a rematch, and lost again. That cycle, commit, charge in, get shut down, basically defines Hibbs as a character. He doesn't lack effort, he lacks adjustment. The suit doesn't help. Hibbs' kangaroo armor is built around enhancing his leaping ability, but everything about it feels over-designed in the worst way. It's bulky, uneven, and completely uninterested in subtlety. The headpiece features two large, rigid kangaroo ears, purely cosmetic, completely unnecessary, and positioned exactly where someone like Spider-Man would instinctively grab them mid-fight. There's no hidden tech justification, they're just there because the theme demands it. The mechanical tail might at least have some purpose. Balance. But it comes with the same problem as the rest of the suit. Too much mass, too much commitment, and not enough practicality. It doesn't streamline him, it anchors it. And then there's the pouch. Because Hibbs didn't just want the movement, he wanted the anatomy. So he built a functional storage pouch into the front of the suit. It's used to carry gear or stolen goods. It is a design choice that makes every combat encounter look like a comedy of errors. It's not just themed, it's overcommitted. The kind of idea that sounds complete on paper and immediately falls apart the second you see it in action. And yet, somehow that wasn't the lowest point. At one stage, Hibbs found himself pulled into a group effort by Grizzly, teaming up with other low-tier Spider-Man villains like Gibbon and the Spot. The group, unofficially known as the Spider-Man Revenge Squad, and more famously labeled the Legion of Losers, actually managed to get the upper hand on Spider-Man for a moment. Not because they were suddenly effective, but because numbers can compensate for a lot. It didn't last. Internal conflicts broke out almost immediately, and the whole thing collapsed into infighting. Hibbs ended right back up where he normally does, prison, reflecting on what went wrong and somehow deciding the answer was more commitment. That mindset followed him to Seagate Prison, where superhuman abilities are dampened. Instead of backing off of the gimmick, Hibbs leaned in harder, training himself physically to compensate. He even built a reputation as a capable hand-to-hand fighter, training alongside Bartok the Leaper, which in a strange way is the most logical step he ever took. If your entire identity is based on leg strength, learning from one of the few characters who actually made that concept work is probably the smartest move available. However, it still didn't fix the bigger issue. Hibbs spent time experimenting with his ways to gain actual superhuman abilities, pursuing mutation treatments that mostly failed until they didn't, but not in a clean, uncontrolled way. He didn't become a sleek, powerful hybrid. He underwent a degenerate mutation that made him bigger, heavier, and more beast-like, but in a grotesque, lumpy fashion. Hibbs resurfaced during the global crisis orchestrated by Dr. Octopus, answering Spider-Man's call to take down Octavius' worldwide installations. For once, he was on the right side of the fight. He even had the perfect setting, Australia, a place where the whole kangaroo thing might finally feel appropriate. It should have been the moment where everything clicked. Instead, he was ambushed by Lady Deathstrike and taken out almost immediately. That's really what defines Brian Hibbs. He's not incompetent, and he's certainly not lazy. If anything, he's one of the most committed characters in this tier of Marvel villains. He studied his idol, trained relentlessly, upgraded his gear, and even physically transformed for the role. But every step forward was built on the same flawed foundation. Total dedication to an idea that was never strong enough to carry. Brian Hibbs didn't fail because he tried. He failed because he never stopped trying to make the kangaroo work. When most villains put on a costume, the goal is pretty clear. Exaggerate something, sharpen identity, maybe hide a weakness. Joshua Waldemeier doesn't get that luxury. There is no suit, there is no design phase. There's just the immediate bizarre aftermath, construction accident, release infused with brick and cement, permanently locked into the shape of a human-sized wall. And somehow, that's worse. Waldemeier isn't wearing a wall-themed outfit. He is the wall. His entire body is a flat rectangular slab of brick and mortar, with just enough suggestion of limbs and a face to function in a panel. He looks less like a supervillain and more like someone cut a section out of a condemned building and told it to go fight Spider-Man. And that's not even the worst part, because at least most bad costumes are trying to help. They might fail, they might look ridiculous, but they're built with some idea of function in mind. The Wall doesn't even get that courtesy. His entire existence is a design flaw. Flat, rigid, uncooperative mass. He doesn't step into a fight. He occupies space and hopes that's enough. Fresh out of the accident, confused and trapped inside something that can barely navigate a doorway, Waldemeier doesn't set out to become a criminal mastermind. He doesn't plan anything. He just wanders directly into chaos, and somehow finds his way onto a New York Mets field in the process. He starts disrupting plays, throwing off the umpires, and generally turning a professional baseball game into something that feels like it's happening in the wrong universe. He moves, but never in a way that feels intentional. Every action looks like it shouldn't be possible. He doesn't run so much as exist forward. He doesn't fight so much as remain present while things happen around him. Even his face doesn't save it. It is pressed into the brickwork, barely expressive, like someone tried to preserve the idea of a human being and then gave up halfway through. There's no intimidation factor, no theatrical edge. Just a guy permanently embedded in one of the least forgiving materials imaginable. And when Spider-Man finally steps in, the fight plays out exactly as it should. Not in a clash, but as a problem. Spider-Man's usual tactics don't really apply. Not because the Wall is cleverly designed, but because he isn't designed at all. It's less a battle, and more Spider-Man realizing he's trying to de-escalate a situation involving a sentient piece of construction debris. And then, just as quickly as it starts, it ends. No final blow, no dramatic takedown. Just a park bench and a conversation. The chaos burns out, and Waldemeier, who went from student to a sentient wall in the span of a single accident, gets talked down from the only villain moment he ever really has. And when you look at the costume, that outcome feels inevitable. No way to refine or evolve the concept without abandoning it entirely. You can't make this sleeker, you can't make it more tactical. There is no natural next step beyond being a wall. He hit his absolute ceiling the second the cement dried. That's the difference between Waldemeier and someone like the Kangaroo. Kangaroo keeps coming back, convinced that the next version will fix the problem. The Wall doesn't get that illusion because there's no better version of this. Just a guy who became a wall, caused a scene, and realized almost immediately that there's nowhere to go from there. When most heroes build a costume, the goal is to translate their power set into something visual, something that makes sense at a glance. A.G. Bell, also known as the Phone Ranger, absolutely does that. The problem is how literally he does it, because instead of looking like a sleek, communication-based hero, he looks like someone got trapped in a 1970s office phone and decided to fight crime. The suit itself is deceptively clean at first glance. A bright yellow bodysuit with bold red gloves and boots. It uses classic colors that feel almost normal until your eyes lock onto the center of his chest. Right there in the middle of his torso is a large, blocky keypad, a push-button telephone dial pad. It isn't subtle or stylized, it's just a phone keypad strapped to a human being. But the real problem isn't the chest, it's his armor. The Phone Ranger's armor isn't really armor at all. It's a full rotary phone casing wrapped around his shoulder. His head and neck sit exactly where the rotary dial would be, making him the literal human component of the device. And mounted behind his head sits the receiver. It isn't integrated into the tech or hidden behind a visor. It's a large, unmistakable handset mounted like it's waiting to be picked up during fights. It hangs off the back of his shoulders, completing the illusion that the entire costume is just an oversized, weaponized landline that somehow learned to walk upright. The result is a design that is technically consistent but visually unhinged. He doesn't just wear phone-themed art, he's assembled from the literal shape of telecommunication. It's less high-tech hero, and more someone recreated a pre-millennium phone from memory and decided it should fight ninjas. This makes him incredibly hard to take seriously in motion. The tragedy is that the concept behind the Phone Ranger actually makes sense. A hero who can tap into any communication system, intercept signals, and monitor networks is generally useful in the Marvel Universe. But instead of expressing that through something streamlined or tactical, the design locks him into the physical silhouette of outdated technology. He isn't a master of digital networks, he's a walking rotary phone with legs. That rigidity becomes his defining trait. The design doesn't feel agile or adaptive, it feels anchored and fixed, as if he has to physically carry the entire weight of the 20th century communications industry on his shoulders at all times. And yet, for all that visual absurdity, the costume still manages one accidental success. When the Phone Ranger was targeted by the scourge of the underworld, that ridiculous armor actually saved his life. The bulky, layered structure of the rotary frame, the same thing that makes him look like a walking relic, was so overbuilt that it caused the Scourge's bullet to ricochet off. It wasn't clever engineering or defensive foresight, it was just a case of being so oddly shaped that the physics of a gunshot didn't know how to handle it. But that's the exception, not the rule. Unlike other low-tier costumes that fail by being too complicated, the Phone Ranger fails by being a victim of his own brand. A hero who doesn't just use communication tech, but one who wears the entire bulky history of it on his head. When a weapons designer for the United States Army decides to break bad, you usually expect something high-tech, maybe a railgun, a stealth suit, or at least something with a decent heads-up display. Alexander Gentry had a master's degree in engineering and a background in cutting-edge ballistics. But when he looked at the animal kingdom for inspiration, he didn't choose the panther or the hawk. He chose the porcupine. And he didn't just adopt the theme. He built a suit that was essentially a walking hazard to everyone in the room, including himself. The original porcupine suit is a masterpiece of kitchen sink design. Gentry was so proud of his creation that he convinced himself it was worth a fortune, despite it looking like a giant angry pincushion that had been rolled through a hardware store. The suit wasn't just covered in quills for defense. It was a cluttered mess of quills designed to fire everything from lasers and concussive bombs to liquid cement and hypnosis lights. There's a fundamental stupidity in the over-engineering here. It is a suit that tries to do everything at once while making the wearer look like a life-size glintwolf. The design is so bulky and unrefined that in his very first outing, he was defeated by Ant-Man and the Wasp. Visually, the porcupine represents the most literal interpretation of the theme possible. It wasn't a sleek, spiked armor. In many of its early iterations, it looked like shaggy, almost hairy, turning a professional weapons designer into a giant bipedal tumbleweed. The ergonomics were a nightmare, because every square inch was covered in a razor-tipped metal projection. Gentry couldn't even stand near a teammate without potentially impaling. This led to his long, depressing streak of joining villain teams like Bartok's Brigade and Count Nefarious agents, only to be labeled a failure and a nuisance. Even the other villains didn't want him around, mostly because his costume was a walking liability that took up too much space and was prone to firing tear gas or sleeping pellets at the wrong time. But the peak of the costume stupidity, and the absolute proof that Gentry's design was a failure, came when he tried to retire. He realized he was a terrible villain and decided to just sell the suit, live off the millions. He took it to the open market, pitching it to everyone from AIM and Hydra, the Kingpin and Magia, and the response was unanimous: no thanks. Even the most desperate criminal organizations in the Marvel Universe looked at the porcupine suit and realized it was more trouble than it was worth. When the Serpent Society, a group of people who literally dress like snakes, turns down your animal-themed suit, you know you failed as an engineer. This culminated in the most fittingly absurd death in comic book history. After Gentry reached out to the Avengers to sell him the suit just to keep it out of criminal hands, he ended up in a scuffle with the Serpent Society. In the middle of the melee, the man with the master's degree in engineering, who created the suit covered in defensive spikes, tripped. He didn't get shot, he didn't get blasted by a super soldier. Alexander Gentry died because he fell over and inadvertently impaled himself on his own quills. It is the ultimate Darwin Award of supervillainy. A man killed by the very design flaw that made his costume so ridiculous in the first place. Captain America, being the nice guy he is, actually gave Gentry a burial in an Avengers reserved grave, and put the suit on display at Avengers Mansion, labeled Honor Foe. But even that legacy is a bit of a joke. When he appeared as a witness in a later lawsuit, She-Hulk pointed out that he was supposed to be dead, and he supposedly just dropped dead again on the spot. Even in the afterlife, the porcupine couldn't escape the fact that his entire identity was built on a premise that was physically and conceptually impossible to sustain. The second porcupine, Redrick Gawking, actually managed to make the suit work a bit better, eventually using it to reform and become a nanny for Spider-Woman's child. But even then, the shadow of Alexander Gentry hangs over the gear. Whether it's being used to rob banks or carry diaper bags, the porcupine suit remains a testament to what happens when an engineer stops thinking about functionality and starts thinking about how many different types of gas he can shoot out of a metal quill. It's not just a bad costume, it's a walking, shaggy reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing about a supervillain is their own lack of coordination. Dr. Bong, last name Lester Verde, is the final boss of high-intelligence stupidity. He's a man who possesses a genius-level mastery of genetic engineering, chemistry, and physics, intellect that could literally reshape the world, and he decided the best way to utilize these gifts was to become a human percussion instrument. While most villains choose an identity to strike fear into their enemies, Lester chose one that sounds like a college dorm room's most prized possession. But in a twisted logic of the Marvel Universe, Bong isn't a drug reference. It's a literal onomatopoeic sound of his giant bell-shaped head being struck. He's a man who turned ringing your own bell into a viable, albeit physically painful, criminal career. The core of the stupidity starts with his choice of weapon. Most geniuses build a gauntlet or a laser. Lester built a giant golden bell for a head. To do anything, to attack, to teleport, to make a point, he has to take his metal prosthetic hand and slap himself in the side of the helmet. This is a villain whose primary superpower is giving himself a massive vibrating concussion on purpose. You have to imagine that mid-fight, when he's making a dramatic speech, he has to stop, hit his own head with a loud bong, and then wait for his vision to stop swimming before he continues the monologue. It's a design that is physically punishing to the wearer in a way that no other suit is. The comics never quite explain how a bitter journalism student who lost his hand to a miniature guillotine suddenly gained the genius-level physics knowledge required to build a teleporting bell suit. But in the world of Howard the Duck, you just kind of learn to roll with it. Visually, it is one of the most bottom-heavy, awkward silhouettes in comic history. He wears his bodysuit and a flowing cape, topped off with a helmet so oversized and rigid that he essentially looks like a piece of church architecture that grew legs and started complaining about the media. There is no tactical advantage to the shape. It doesn't really protect his neck. It's a giant target, and it makes him look like a luxury doorstop. The commitment to the bit is so absolute that it transcends logic. He isn't just Bellman. He is a man who looked at the cathedral tower and decided, yes, that is the peak of intimidation. But the stupidity reaches its peak when you look at how he actually uses his genius. In his long-standing feud with Howard the Duck, his primary motivation wasn't world domination. He just had a crush on Howard's girlfriend, Beverly Switzer. He eventually moved her to a remote island where he spent his time genetically engineering quintessential children and worrying about television standards. This culminated in one of his most ridiculous arcs, where he battled She-Hulk over censorship of violent TV. Plans so meta and convoluted that She-Hulk eventually had to break the fourth wall just to navigate the logic of the fight. Perhaps the most surreal turn in Bong's history is when he realized that being a Bell-themed villain was a dead end, and decided to get a PhD in psychology. He actually became a legitimate practicing therapist for the superhuman community. His most famous patient was Deadpool, and there are actual panels of the merc with a mouth bearing his soul to a man wearing a 300-pound musical instrument on his head. It's the ultimate punchline to his career. He's a man so smart he can fix Deadpool's mind, but so fundamentally stupid that he still thinks wearing a bell to work is a professional choice. Dr. Bong is the perfect finale for this lineup, because he proves that you can have all the power in the world, but if your aesthetic choice is concussive brassware, you are always going to be a joke. He doesn't just wear a stupid costume. He has dedicated his entire biological existence to a gimmick that requires himself to punch himself in the face to function. If you somehow survive all 40 minutes of horrible costumes, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive into comic book history. And if you want to help keep the channel running and support these massive retrospective projects, consider joining as a channel member or dropping a tip on Ko-Fi. The links are down in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.